Just before 7 a.m. on Wednesday, December 22, 2010, emergency dispatch receives reports of smoke coming from a vacant dry cleaners on Chicago's South Side. Engine 72 is the first company to arrive on the scene, followed immediately by the battalion chief, who declares the scene a working fire. The 84-year-old commercial structure has been empty for more than 5 years. City officials previously cited the building owners for the condition of the building and ordered them to repair or demolish the structure. Firefighters suspect that squatters may be inside of the building and started the fire. Dispatch initiates a RIT team response. With 2 lines on the fire and a positive water supply established, the fire is reportedly under control. 16 minutes after first arrival, a mayday goes out.
Mayday, mayday, emergency, give me a 211, give me an EMS plan 1. We had a collapse in the rear of the building. Building came out, we got guys trapped.
A frantic search for the trapped firefighters follows the roof collapse. 17 firefighters are injured. Edward Stringer, 47, and Corey Ancom, 34, were the last 2 to be pulled from the rubble. Both men were taken to nearby hospitals, where they died from injuries suffered from falling debris. Edward Stringer was a 12-year department veteran and leaves behind his mother and 2 adult children. Corey Ancom joined the department in 2009 and leaves behind his wife and 3 children. This tragic day marked the 100th anniversary of the fire at the Chicago Union Stockyards, where 21 firefighters died from a wall collapse. Until 9/11, it was the deadliest day in firefighter history.
Once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you to the IAFF, and thank you to all of you for what you do. December 22nd, 2010, as the video showed, was the 100th anniversary of the loss of 21 firefighters and one of the highest-ranking officials of the fire department in our Union Stockyards fire. A tragedy, to say the least. Apologize there. Corey Ancom was a Chicago police officer for about a year with the fire department with the police department for about a year before he joined the fire department. Survived by his wife and 2 small children. Firefighter Ed Stringer, 12-year department member, survived by his 2 children and his mother. Chicago to date has experienced 568 line-of-duty deaths. Multiple line-of-duty deaths history. Of course, 343 members in the New York Fire Department back in 9/11. Texas City, Texas has also had a large loss of life back in 1947. Chicago, Illinois, as we stated, lost 21 members. On the opening video, I should denote that the front of the structure showed fencing around it, and it actually looked like a vacant building that you would say, why would you put anybody in there? In fact, the Chicago Fire Department was hammered by the press and by fire publications about why would you do that? Why would you risk the lives for that? This is the actual photograph of the front of the building on the day of the event, or just prior to the day of the event. This is the cover of our after-action review that we gave to all our members, and in fact, most of my information will come directly from that after-action review. Also in the video, you showed some plumes of smoke that came up. This was not the case when we arrived on the scene. The fire did not play a very significant role in this event at all. 200 members responded to the incident, operating approximately 70 apparatus. Multiple city agencies, as you can imagine, participated, along with many local hospitals involved. 17 members were injured. 1 remained in critical condition for several days after the incident. 3 of our members, 3 officers, are currently on disability. Their return is questionable. The dispatch occurred at shift change, just like happened in the other incident we heard about. That's probably the worst time that you can have an incident occur. How many people were actually on the apparatus? That's a good question, because we know that as firefighters, when you get a fire call, hey, I'm going. You might wind up with an extra guy on a rig. You might wind up with a guy that just threw his stuff on a rig. So that played a part in what happened here as well. We have a time and an attendance sheet that we use for accountability, and usually at shift change, you fill out a time and attendance sheet and you place that in the front seat of the apparatus. When this event occurred, all those sheets became useless to us. We really didn't know who was on what apparatus, and most of the officers were buried in the rubble, and I'll cover that. Firefighter Ankle's relief had not arrived. He was the only member of his company that was not relieved. Same for firefighter Stringer. He was the only member of his company not relieved. One company officer had just walked in the firehouse, quick relief of his partner, got in the rig, asked the guys, everybody know their job? Okay, let's go. He happened to be the officer of firefighter Corey Ankle, who unfortunately he never even met, did not know him. The structure itself, as the video said, we don't have an actual date on when it was built. It was 75 by 125. And really, if you look at the slide, it's two buildings. The actual building that collapsed was the truss roof portion in the rear, which was about a 50 by 60 foot section. The front section was 75 by 125. It was considered vacant for approximately 5 years. It was known by nearby residents to have squatters that frequented the building. It was not a secured building. It was open. At least from the rear portion, it was open. The front was secured. Building records from the City of Chicago Building Department show that permit work was done during the winter of '84 and '85, which consisted mostly of the front half of the building, which is the lower part of the slide, which was not involved in the collapse. It's not known if there was any other additional major changes that took place to the structure that perhaps were not permitted. When you look at this picture, what we did was we went to Google Earth just to see what it kind of looked like prior to the event, and we really don't know how old these photographs are. But one thing you do see is vegetation, and unfortunately, I don't have a pointer where I can get to the big slides. On the Sector 4 wall towards the front, you can see some vegetation. If you blow it up, you see it even greater. There is actually vegetation growing out of the roof of the building. That's a clear sign that obviously that the moisture is getting in. And I always say any building that you have where you see trees growing out of, you've got a problem. The rear section of the building, the truss roof section, if you look at the Sector 3 wall, which would be to the left, about dead center there, you see some discoloration. That's an area there as we blow it up. And if you look towards the rear, Sector 3, you see some other discoloration. We can actually see growth there. And it's actually right near where one of the trusses were, that we found that was rotted. It's right in that general location. Once again, an overhead view showing the growth. The big tree that you see there, that's actually a courtyard. That one's not growing from the roof, thank God. And again, just another picture of the structure. Response times. On the way to work that morning, one of the lieutenants that actually responded to the incident, he saw smoke in a general area. This was an area that had a lot of factories. Some were vacant, and he was full aware of it. His cell phone wasn't working, so when he got to the firehouse, he told the guys, hey, listen, I see some smoke in the area of the old Solo Cup Company. So with that, he called dispatch. His guys were kind of prepping. They were getting ready to go, so they were going to have a good push out. They were not going to be the first to company, but they were going to have a pretty good push out. So he made the phone call. It was an approximate address, so we didn't have a definite address that we were going to, just an approximate location. We send in Chicago a complement for a call of a fire of 2 engines, 2 trucks, and a battalion chief, and then you get a squad started in. When you say the word fire, you get a RIT team response, which consists of a RIT chief, a RIT truck, and an ALS ambulance, and an EMS field chief. So 3 minutes from time of dispatch to the arrival of the first unit, the alarm was escalated, as you can see, to what we call a stolen box alarm. That's our first escalation of alarm. That was done by the battalion chief because what happened was he did have reports of a frozen hydrant in Sector 1, and he did have reports of a small fire in a commercial structure from the second due engine. So 6 minutes he escalated the alarm. He immediately set a staging area. Any of you guys that might have gone to the website and heard all the transmissions, there's like 2 hours of transmissions, you can hear him definitively set a staging area. Collapse occurred 16 minutes after the first units arrived. The mobile communication unit that usually responds, that handles our communications, arrived right at collapse time. So he was not able to set up to be prepared for anything like this. Deployment of the equipment, first engine went to Sector 1, encountered a frozen hydrant. Tower Ladder 34, which was Firefighter Akam's unit, reported to Sector 1, sending 2 members to the roof, 3 members to Force Entry in Sector 1 because there was burglar gates, and to assist with the lead out from Engine 72, the first engine. Second engine that responded reported to the rear, Sector 3. 1 truck team without the apparatus went to Sector 3 and threw a 20-foot ground ladder to access the roof. The battalion chief, upon the reports, the initial reports being there was some smoke showing, and the second engine reported that he could see it from the rear because he had an open overhead door. That caused for the chief to immediately go to the rear of the building while he fully understood that his companies were forced entry through the front in Sector 1. The extent of the fire, as I said, it was minimal. I mean, these are actual statements from the guys that got on the scene. You know, it was nickel dime. It was primarily rubbish. They physically saw a pile of rubbish, or what remained of a pile of rubbish, and 2x4s that were built. That the fire was actually moving upward up to 2x4s, but no, by any stretch of the imagination, was this a raging fire. Reports of hazy smoke. Nobody went on air. They all had air packs on, but you could see through the building, and it was not a cause for concern. Due to the size of the building, 2 attack lines were stretched, one from Sector 1 and one from Sector 3. They were both 2.5-inch lines, reduced to 1 3/4 for extinguishment purposes. If you look at this slide and you look closely, you can actually see the fire hose from Engine 72. That was the line that came from Sector 1. This was the area where they saw 2x4s burning, and what you could see here is actually embers in a general area. All those fresh cuts in the wood were from when we were trying to locate the firefighters that were trapped underneath the roof. So this is the actual area of the fire. Again, there was not a lot of fire that they saw, and I thought pretty much they had a rubbish fire is what it boils down to. The roof team initially radioed that the front flat roof was in poor condition, and then proceeded to the truss roof section in the rear. That transmission was not picked up by the Still Arm Battalion Chief. He did not hear that clearly at all. The officer of the truck company deployed to the rear of the building in Sector 3 said he saw a lazy fire near the roof line by the Sector 3 parapet wall. The officer requested that the roof team open up that area and a hand line to be brought to the roof to wash it down. And when I say that he says it was just a little bit of fire, I mean a flicker. No pushing smoke, no raging fire, a flicker of fire. An investigative hole was made near the Sector 4 wall. That hole produced no smoke, no visible heat, and again, that was the same individual that made that hole that made the comment on the radio that the front roof was in poor condition. One roof team member recalled that when he buried his axe in the roof, he did notice that it vibrated the whole roof. That should be a light bulb going off when you're a roof man and you bury your axe and you feel significant shift in that roof or vibration in the roof. That's not normal. At this point, we're about 10 minutes into the incident. 16 minutes after arrival of the first units on the scene, the roof failed. Now, the roof consisted of 2 trusses. And of course, again, we had a front building and a back building. This particular building, let's call it, was, as I said, about 50 by 60. The Sector 2 wall would have been supported by another factory. The Sector 3 wall in the rear and the Sector 4 wall on the east side were unsupported because, as I said, there was like a courtyard near the Sector 4 wall. This overhead shot, when we talk about the fire that we had, you can see where they're playing their hose lines on what remains of a voided area. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as I go down the road here. Location of the members at the time of collapse, there was actually 18 members within the structure, so we were very fortunate. 5 members were on the roof. 6 members at ground level on the exterior of the structure, a total of 29 total members in or near the collapse zone. So we definitely had the recipe to repeat history where we could have lost, if we had a secondary collapse of that front building, 29 members. Firefighter Acom was member number 8, and I'm not quite sure if you can see that, but he would have been up near the left-hand portion of the grouping of individuals. Firefighter Stringer, number 22, he would be closer towards the Sector 4 wall where you see the hose kind of snake through there. Ironically, from everybody from the youngest member to the most senior member, and we had officers there that had 30 years on the job, their gut feelings told them, I don't like this place. And quite frankly, a lot of them made that comment to each other. The vibration, as I stated, when they buried the axe in the roof, again, should have told them something. The guys on the roof actually described a shift or a little bump before the whole roof came down. So there was a shift, some kind of movement, whether it was a truss failure, whether it was a wall failure, whether it was a combination of both that, or a sequence of both that happened in a flash of a second, still remains to be determined. The guys on the inside were very definite. They heard one loud crack. So again, was it a wall that started moving? Because the next statement of sounds of bowling pins, it was, as the brick started failing and there was a 3-course brick thick, you can imagine the sounds of, it sounded like bowling pins that were rolling. So the crack, the sounds of the bowling pins indicating a wall failure. At what point? Not sure. All within a fraction of a second. One comment was made, it's coming down. And the reason I put down here, it's a quote by Firefighter Stringer for several reasons. The after-action review, which every member attended, they heard that comment. The guy that was on the roof that made the exploratory hole, he heard that comment from the roof. He was directly above where we found Firefighter Stringer. So one person saw something. Unfortunately, we'll never know what he saw. What happened? These next 4 slides are going to tell the tale of a very, very dangerous building, unbeknownst to us. And I'm not going to go through every single thing because I know we're a little bit short on time. In just August of 2007, the city took the owners to court. What they saw and what is quoted from the inspector's determination from his inspection is in italics. Failure to comply with municipal code of the city of Chicago as follows. Fail to maintain parapet wall in good repair and free from cracks and defects. Parapet wall missing mortar. Fail to maintain lintel in good repair and free from cracks and defects. Lintels rusted, open joints. We determined this to be the Sector 4 wall, which actually failed. Failed to securely fasten loose plate glass windows. The south plate glass windows were broken. Again, that's the Sector 4 wall. Failed to maintain the roof in a sound condition and repair, watertight and free from defects. Holes in the roof, rotted and leaking. We know this to be true definitely to the front portion because of the overhead shots. So we know that the front portion had physical signs without a doubt, and then it goes on to talk about the truss. Remove sewage and stagnant water. There was a basement in this facility. Restore roof live load to original use by removing additional weights or structures attached to the trusses. We're not quite sure exactly what he meant by that, but he does state that the trusses were rotted. Fail to maintain the exterior walls of a building or structure free from holes, breaks, loose or rotting boards or timbers, and any other conditions which might admit rain or dampness into the walls. Remember the trees growing from the roof or the shrubbery on the roof. Exterior wall loose and missing bricks on north elevation. That would have been the Sector 3 wall that failed. Open limestone joints on the south elevation. Again, that's the Sector 4 wall that failed. And keep in mind, these are 3-course thick. Perform or allow work to be performed without submitting plans or prepared, signed, and sealed by a licensed architect or structural engineer. So what he's saying here is they want him to prepare, to submit for permits for proper repairs. Failed to maintain the building or structure in a structurally safe and stable condition. The building commissioner requests submission again. He wants structural reports. He wants to know the report for the roof and the exterior walls. He needs to know that they're going to be repaired. Failed to maintain interior walls and ceilings free from holes and cracks. All interior walls and ceiling were water damaged. Ceiling tiles were sagging. Sections of the tiles were missing. The interior walls were missing mortar. I'm not quite sure what they meant by the interior walls were missing mortar. We know that as we entered the front portion of the building, yes, the ceiling tiles and everything in that front portion was sagging, obviously, to multiple leaks. Failed to maintain building or structure in a structurally safe and stable condition again. More or less, the building was in poor condition. The city wanted to fine the individuals up to $7,000 a day, which we all know if you can't afford to maintain your building, you're certainly not going to pay any fines. The result of the legal action was a settlement between the City of Chicago and the building owner on October 6, 2009. That's 2 years later. That's after initially being cited. It states that the owner would pay a nominal sum for the fees incurred by the city, that the owner agreed not to lease the company and keeping it vacant until a further court order. The owner would bring the building into full compliance with the municipal code or sell the property by November 1st of 2010. That's giving him another year to make the corrections to this building. And now we're going to levy a fine of $500 a day, which is the equivalent up to the date of collapse of about $200,000 to $250,000. So the owner had plenty of time to do what was right. However, he didn't. No further information from this point was gathered. I will point out, as long as I'm talking about the building, the state's attorney's office just a couple weeks ago informed my office that they were going after the building owner for involuntary manslaughter on 2 counts. Here's a photograph of the truss. Remember I stated that there was shrubbery growing from the roof in an area where there was a truss. This is the truss that was sitting nearest that location. If you note the little crippler tacked onto it, we're not quite sure exactly what that was doing. I don't know if he had added something to it, the building owner. At any rate, this particular truss system we found in 3 pieces. The mortar was like dust. After the collapse, what remained, we can actually go in and pull a brick out. We can push a wall over, the little bits of walls that were left we could push over. Thank God for the structure itself, for having an interior wall made of cinder block, which encompassed a boiler room at one time, and I'll explain to you why. Snow. It's the city of Chicago, and we have our fair share of it. Unfortunately, the 22 inches that fell back in February didn't fall back in December, because I'm sure it might have brought this place down. Snow does a couple things. It certainly adds weight to an unstable structure, but it also hides those deficiencies that one might see when you go to make a roof. So keep that in the back of your mind. The National Weather Service, during the after-action review, we wanted to find as much data as we possibly could to make sure that we had a good understanding of what we were up against or what the guys were up against at the time this happened. Real quick, day number 4, we had a little over 3 inches of snow, December 4th, I should say. December 9th, you see another inch. On the 10th and the 11th, you see a warm trend, and then you see cool nights, a freeze trend. We know what let's just call it the mortar that was like the consistency of dust. Once it gets wet and once it freezes, we have that expansion and contraction. On the 12th, 2.5 more inches. On the 16th, another inch. On the 20th, a couple days before the collapse, 3.5 inches of snow. On the 21st, we had a little thaw, and we had some rain, adding, again, additional weight to the roof. To summarize the national weather information, the Chicagoland area saw a below-average cold spell approximately 1 week before the incident, December 12th through the 15th. From December 4th onward, the Midway Airport reporting station recorded snow on the ground consistently from 1 to 3 inches. On December 20th, the new snowfall added approximately 3 inches of snow to an existing 3 inches of snow on the ground, bringing the total snow to 6 inches. By the morning of December 22nd, the total recorded snow on the ground was at least 4 inches. The reduction of snow from 6 inches recorded 2 days earlier can be accounted for by a brief period of above freezing temperatures and trace amounts of rain. This photograph was highly publicized. It was soon after the collapse occurred. In fact, you could tell there's not many people there. I really don't know who took this picture. But what we looked at during the after-action review was how much fire did we really have. I mean, obviously what the guy saw was it was nickel dime. There was nothing there. It was rubbish. But we had a weakened structure that had rotted members, and the general area of where the fire was, that heat that went up, obviously could have started some of the lower portions of the roof decking underneath, from being deteriorated, would allow that to at least heat up to the point where you could have a smoldering fire. Interesting comment from a couple of the members in the after-action review was that they said, Chief, just before it fell, I remember seeing like burning embers floating down. Okay, so that tells me I had something up there. Not a raging fire, but something. The lazy fire on the roof line, again, another indicator that heat had gotten up, into the truss area, but not necessarily enough to, cause what we considered this catastrophic failure. So really, did we see all the smoldering portions? Probably not. The guy that made the first hole indicated no heat, no smoke. One of the other officers that were in the rear looked down through one of the natural openings. There was a small skylight near the Sector 3 wall, poked his head down there, called the chief and says, I got no fire in the trusses, I see nothing. Interesting comment from one of the structural engineers that we talked to, and I suppose this one should hit home for everybody. Any fire burning structural members will reduce the structural capability of that member. That's true. I don't know anything that fire burns other than concrete that it has an impact on, and it even has an impact on concrete. The additional weight load of the members working on the roof, again, is that because of the fire? Well, certainly the call for the fire brought us there. Certainly that has an impact on a weakened structure. Possible triggers of the collapse, from what we know, the structure was in such poor condition that collapse was imminent. And that's even without us showing up to the scene. The building was abandoned for at least 5 years, had no apparent maintenance, such as tuck pointing or roof repairs. The building was open to the elements, had missing or rotted lintels over 3 of the windows on the Sector 4 wall, mortar erosion, structural components of the bowstrings truss were weakened due to decay. Vegetation, as I said, could be seen growing through the roof from various photographs. In addition, and here's kind of a bombshell that we heard, and this ought to affect everybody in this room, it's now understood that the bowstring trusses from this time period were under-engineered by as much as 40%. So what do we got? We got a building that's ready to fall down, a building that wasn't designed very well, and then we add a little bit of fire, we add a lot of snow, and we had some firemen doing what we normally do best, and that is try and bust open a building to get to the fire, and we have a recipe for disaster. The weather, as I stated, snow accumulations up to 4 inches, added thousands of pounds. We all saw the data, and again, as far as like the thawing and the freezing aspects, definitely a factor. It's possible that the fire, as minimum as it was, further weakened structural supports near the Sector 3 and Sector 4 walls. Several firefighters working inside the structure, creating impact loads by trying to pull down ceiling for overhaul, removing a door, venting some windows on the Sector 4 wall, which we now know was in bad shape. There was at least 6 officers or members on the roof at various times, 5 at the time of collapse, as we discussed. Each would have added additional weight and impact loads as they moved about using saws and axes to ventilate and overhaul. The weight of the fire personnel on the roof operating in the area of the poorly maintained structure and overhaul operations of the fire personnel working within the structure disturbed and already weakened supporting members were likely contributing factors. So there was a combination of effects: the design deficiencies, the violations, the weather, the fire, and the impact load of our firefighters. Voids. If it was not for the one cinder block wall creating the void, we would have lost several more firefighters right in this area. Voids played a significant impact in saving our guys' lives. Here's a couple pictures of the voids. The one on the left actually shows the hose line brought in from Sector 1. This is a general area where we found firefighter Stringer. The other one to the right actually shows the cinder block wall. And this void is where several of the firefighters were, during the initial collapse, they were able to self-extricate themselves, turn around and help get a couple of the brothers out that were lightly pinned by some of the debris. I say were we extremely fortunate or lucky. Again, the voids created was certainly an impact in saving our guys' lives. The SCBAs that we had on actually prevented 3 of the guys from being crushed further. They had 45-minute cylinders on, and the supporting members wound up pinning them with their air packs. One of the members, the guys got in there and actually cut the guy out of the air pack. 2 of them had to be rescued by some additional methods by the rescue team. Members were actually pushed out of the building by the force of the wind, and they went through the back wall of the building. That was the force. The guys in the front of the building described a gush of wind that came out the front with a little blast of smoke and dust. So obviously the force as the roof came down somewhat did us a favor. So as we move forward, the loss of life cannot go unrecognized. Guys that say, geez, Chief, we wouldn't do anything different, I can't live with that statement. We have to do something different. Buildings having significant violations compromising safety must be brought to the attention of the first responders. We've made that correction. Now we take information from the building department, we incorporate that into our automatic dispatch. What they see on a printout now says, warning, dangerous building. We must treat every vacant structure as dangerous. Take into account that these structures have been vacant or abandoned for any length of time, could be potentially dangerous to us. Fire companies have to survey their areas. This building, actually we did a building survey about a month prior to this. Unfortunately, this building never made that survey. And each morning, as I read structural fire reports, we have a column for open and dangerous buildings. And we also have the opportunity for fire prevention to send them out there to look at these buildings. So we have avenues to get this information to the building department, which then equates to getting it put into dispatch. Consider the snow and water can accumulate on these vacant buildings. If you have a flat roof structure that's been abandoned for a while, chances are they're not cleaning out the scuppers, the water's not draining from the roof. So if you have snow or heavy rains, take that into consideration. Limit the resources dedicated to an interior of a vacant structure. Consider the risk versus the award of an aggressive fire attack. And again, this was not much of a fire. Company officers must know who is on their company. So in other words, at shift change, if you're a relief guy, you got to take a good look at what you have. Follow your instincts. We talked about the gut feelings from the youngest guys to the oldest guys. Follow those. They're telling you something. Your experience is telling you something. Battalion chiefs, when you go to assume command of an incident, be properly dressed. In this case, the chief got on the scene, set his units up, parked his car about a half a block away. When the second chief or the RIT chief got on the scene, he notified him, hey, I'm gonna go get dressed. So he was not even aware that there was a collapse of the structure. He heard a 211 alarm announced for a fire and wasn't even aware it was actually his fire until he started walking back and he saw the aftermath. So you got to be ready to assume command and take charge of the incident, so be ready. Chief officers, you know, when you take control, take a step back and see what you got. Maydays. Company officers have to conduct a roll call as soon as you can and report that to the chief officer when you have all your members. All right? In this case, my officers were all buried. When I got to the scene of the incident, which was shortly after the collapse, all I saw was arms and legs sticking out of bricks. When they got those guys out, those were my officers. When I asked them, Do you think you have everybody? What do you think the look on their face looked like? One guy had a gash in his head. He had no clue because he was dazed and confused. It was one of his members that died. SCBAs removed at the scene of an incident. I had a pile of SCBAs because guys doffed them right away, threw them in a pile. All their pass alarms activated. How am I going to find a guy in the rubble with all those pass alarms going off? I had to give somebody a job to say, take all the SCBAs, get them out of here, and shut them off. EMS command personnel that make removals, this was rather critical because this became rather confusing to us as we went through the motions of tracking everybody. We need to know the name of the member who was transported, what hospital you went to, the condition of the member upon arrival, and most important, did you take anybody else with you? Guys that went with for the ride to assist, I lost a guy for an hour and a half we were searching for him. We did not know that he went with the ambulance. Benefits. This goes for everybody in this room. It might sound kind of odd. Have your benefits wired tight. If you don't have the right people down for your benefit package, guess what? The wrong person's going to be compensated. Worse than that, the benefits may not even be included to some of your closest family members that should be. So please, your department needs to know all your emergency contact numbers, meaning cell phone numbers where I can meet your loved one, find a way to contact your loved ones. Their business numbers, your home phone numbers. The last thing I want to do is send a representative from my department to someone's house and that person no longer lives there and I'm looking for his wife. Every member, again, your insurance benefits, have them wired tight. And in closing, it's really not enough time to talk effectively about what happened here. There's our after-action review consisted of having everybody in a room and follow up by individual interviews. The company officers here really, I can't say they did a lot of things wrong. It was a routine nickel-dime incident. It just went bad. And a lot of blame can be laid on that structure and the building owners that own that structure. But I can tell you one thing from our perspective, and from everybody's perspective that serves in the fire service, if someone's going to stand out there and hold a banner that says, don't come in, this building's going to fall on your head, trust me, you're not going to go in there. This building had that capabilities and we were not aware of it. To this day now, I said some of the reports that came out, we add this to our dispatch. We just received a grant for $800,000 to put the markings on open, dangerous buildings and vacant buildings that are subject to a lot of different violations. So we are going to make headways. The loss of life here is not going to go, I don't want to say unrewarded, but I mean the loss of their life is certainly going to help us out to move forward. So once again, to the men and women of the Chicago Fire Department that were involved in this, they told the truth, which is important in an after-action review. I can't thank them enough for their efforts that they put out every day. Their professionalism, unwavered. As we move forward, we'll never forget the sacrifices not only our brothers have made, but all the brothers from across the country and from Canada. The IAF, Mr. President, I thank you very much. And to the men and women that serve throughout this country and Canada, please stay safe out there.